Trace went really well today.
Oh, good. What happened?
You know, we're getting down to some specifics of having. The concern is that you just enter into the sick system and it reports to the state as your business software. There's no duplicate inputting.
Right.
Also on the wet weight, I suggested that, hey, why don't you go to a farm and see if that actually works? To theft, they're going to add, and theft, you're going to have to input a police law or a police report number if you're reporting theft. So we were productive stuff to make it work.
Oh, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
Really? If you claim your plants were stolen?
Yes. If you call the sheriffs, they 9 times out of 10 don't have the power to send somebody out to take a report.
All right.
Sherry Shatmeyer. Carmel was going to be here to lead the meeting, but unfortunately she got called away for fire recovery, so she asked me just to get this kickoff going. So do we want to take roll now? Okay, go ahead, yeah.
Okay, so this is Ash. I'm going to go ahead and take roll. I'll start with our county staff. Sherry Shatmeyer. Here. Jack Curry. Here. Zdrowski.
Here.
And Liz Cater. Here. And on the call, do we have Casey O'Neill?
Yes, I'm here.
And
I'm here.
Ron Word.
I'm
Word. Okay. Back to you on the call. Looks like you're muted. Is there anyone else who may miss on the call?
Okay. All right, thank you all for participating. This is a topic that has severely hit the Treasurer Tax Collector's Office, and so I just actually put on this group probably about a week and a half ago. So we'll just kind of, does everybody first maybe want to tell me, I think I know who most of you are. Actually, I think I know who all of you are. Okay. Okay, I was just wondering as far as what your roles are, but I think I know all of you. So it's going to be Valerie. Is that Ron? Is that who's
no
Valerie?
different.
Edwards. Okay. I think
yeah.
Maybe not my name. I maybe know my face, but on the call now. Is she? Can you hear me? Valerie? No.
Hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, I'm on the call.
Sorry. Okay. Okay. So anyway, I think maybe we definitely need to talk about goals of this group, this working group, and we can go and maybe start with our participants. Would you be kind of go to line? Casey, you maybe want to start and let us know what you're hoping to get from this working group.
Definitely. So, obviously the definition of cycle is very, very crucial. I think one point as an initial must happen is that it's got to be a successful cycle. For people to be penalized for crop failure or, we saw with the fires. So one, its definition has got to be revised to be a successful cycle. And further, I'd like to propose that we look at a recommendation for the board to remove the minimum tax per cycle. The logistics of the thing alone make it quite difficult in terms of, I think the Ag Department has done a phenomenal job this year, but there are still farms getting their first inspections. And so if you've got people who are doing multiple cycles, 3, 4, 5 cycles a year, and there's the expectation that the Ag Department is somehow going to come out and take a look at each cycle, I don't think that's very realistic. And so the other fact is that the cycles, you're going to get a different amount of income depending upon how your cycle does, how it works, and pegging an arbitrary minimum amount to each cycle is essentially penalizes people who are doing multiple cycles, because if, for instance, my farm does straight outdoor, we're going to have a much larger total number for our one cycle of outdoor than I would have if I was doing multiple cycles of dep. So it would make significantly more sense just to have the basic minimum with a 2.5% gross tax for all sales. And so who does multiple cycles and ends up with more sales is going to pay more taxes. And then we get rid of sort of this onerous added layer. So that's essentially in a nutshell what my thoughts are on this topic.
Okay, Casey. Hannah?
I would concur with Casey, and really, I originally did not want to participate in this working group because I thought it was going to be much more technical. But as it relates, I mean, to the logistics of how ag and farmers are tracing things, but because it does relate, as you know, Sherry, I've had conversations with you to the tax issue. Particularly, I became concerned with some of the current language of the tax ordinance and some of the potential suggestions for cleaning it up, both in terms of the way that Casey was discussing it and in terms of not just, and again, I don't know if this is appropriate, I don't know the parameters of this working group, if it's beyond just cycles. I kind of remember that it was cycles and something else, but number of inspections, I see. Okay, so I think that as it relates to both the local tax issue as well as the good standing of a participant and how that relates to other requirements, both local and at state level, that's it to the extent that I am concerned about tightening up what we're doing.
Thank you. Ron?
I think that along with what Casey said, I think initially the board was concerned about tracking and keeping track of this tax base. And we're not at the year yet. There are a few people who are doing cycles now, which I don't think are going to be that successful. A lot of new people. So, you know, you do need to know that they don't all work. But once track trace is in place, once we're doing the Board of Equalization reporting as well as the county tax reporting, those things can all be reconciled as just a standard cultivation would be. And rather than trying to keep it to a cycle, it would just be a business year. And you can track it quarterly with the resale license as well as what's reported to the county.
Okay, Valerie? Is that on the call or? Okay.
Valerie?
Yep.
Sorry, I had to back up mute. Yeah, I agree that no minimum tax. I'm trying to think of what other industry, you know, charges a minimum tax on nothing sold. And I agree that, you know, as track race kicks into gear, those are going to be able to be collected.
Okay, so maybe we'll let, and particularly since this is also not just cycles, but the number of inspections, Dan, you want to comment on what's going on in your shop?
Well, we're the pre-site inspection, and my feeling, I mean, the pre-site is done on everybody that's getting cultivation permit as it stands now. What I'd like to see in the future is, you know, again, if you are compliant, I don't feel that you need as much oversight, then we could cut back on those inspections. That's what we do with traditional, I'll say traditional ag. But I suspect, you know, that for the next, you know, maybe couple of years, since we have such a large learning curve with the cultivators, that, you know, we're going to be spending a little more time out in the field to make sure that things are still compliant, because we're issuing permits that have, you know, a document with them stating that they need to do some things. So those will still have to be kind of, you know, vetted to make sure that they've come into compliance. So kind of how I see things.
forward. But again, I mean, as it stands right now, the order says that we will do a pre-site inspection before issuing a permit, so we'd have to change that over time. And normally with traditional ag, we have set inspections, you know, it's based on complaint history and, you know, what kind of applications are taking place, and it's a variety of things that we get to decide if we're going to make an inspection or not. So that's kind of my input.
Thank you. Anything you add?
The only thing I'll add for the moment, and I'll confess, I think I've looked at cannabis for a couple of weeks.
Oh.
I know. But of the changes that were done for the amendments to 10.817, the main issue about mid-cycle was for third-party inspectors, and that got taken out. So I don't know, that's why Diane's only talking about a pre-permit site inspection as opposed to anything that's by third-party inspectors, but still going through the ordinance on that. I think that's why the more onus here on the cultivation cycle in 10.817 as opposed to growing cycle through the tax ordinance.
And this is Diane, and there is one more inspection that the county is supposed to do. The cultivation cycle is for the third party, but not for us.
So, Matt, cultivation cycle and growing cycle are two different things?
Similar to interpretive.
That's helpful.
10.817 was drafted on its own regarding, you know, the idea of the cultivation cycle. The tax ordinance came first a year before, and uses the phrase growing cycle.
I think you reconcile those. Or do you have to reconcile?
I'm sure you have to, but it started out as cycles and number of inspections. It wasn't just about tax issues. It was about inspections under 10.817.
Okay.
That's what you're talking about.
So, did this added to this as the tax collector because of issues that have just been raised for the last couple of months? Is that what's happened with this? It did not start out necessarily as a tax collector cycle issue, maybe?
Maybe. I can't speak to that.
Okay. I think the reason it is that is because you're being taxed
Tied to that. Okay.
cycles, right?
Okay, and everybody...
This is Hannah. Can I add one thing?
Sure.
I forgot to mention that also of concern, and I'm really not sure if it's appropriate in this context or not, but it really dovetails, and is, I think I mentioned to you, Shari, that I really believe that there's a need to educate some of the county departments, maybe not less so the ag now, but certainly all kinds of departments in the different aspects of cycles and how it affects outcome and numbers and amount and whatnot, if we are sticking with a growing cycle thing and not just reducing it to a straight cross minimum based on square footage and then or as a minimum and then a percent of gross receipts. You know, I think that would eliminate a lot of the difficulties. And then finally, the effect that loss has on this, and again, I don't know if it's appropriate in this context or another context, but I keep wanting to bring up everywhere I can in terms of defining loss broader than, and I'm speaking about the fire right now, than just the incineration of crops that may have occurred, to include people who, through ash or even smoke, are not going to be able to sell their product for as much or at all because it does test out okay, or people who part of their crop withered away because they weren't able to water it and stuff like that. And I apologize if this isn't the right form to bring that up, but I always want to bring it up in case it is.
So are you referring to people outside the evacuation zone or people primarily in the evacuation? Are you talking about people outside the evacuation zone?
course, the evacuation zone, and that certainly would speak directly to the not being able to water. But with respect to the ash and the smoke, I think that it's a broader area potentially than the evacuation zone. And so, for example,
Was that or Casey? I couldn't tell who that was.
Yeah, I'm going to wait for Hannah.
Oh,
go ahead. Jump in, because you guys have a lot more technical knowledge.
Yeah, what Sonoma County has done is they have given the ag inspector the ability to go out if somebody believes they have had damage to their crop, to have the ag department come out and evaluate the percentage of that loss. Therefore, that's a reduction on the tax. And that's really, I think, is it to the experts, which is the ag department, to really make that determination.
and shaking her head that we are getting calls on that as well, and her inspectors are going out.
Well, I do know that Sonoma's doing that, and I didn't, and we can certainly do that. We do that with other crops. So, but that's again, whether or not we're going to, give that, tax break or whatever you want to call it. I don't know. I mean, that's
okay. And just so everybody's clear, I'm not sure if everybody's aware of the directives that the Board of Supervisors basically at the last meeting or even the meeting before that, there were directives, but what it affected was people in the evacuation zone, and if they were adversely affected by anything to do with the fire, whether it be ash or smoke or not being able to water or the reason that but directly to the fire. One of the things that they've said is that if you had total crop loss related to the fire, you will have, of course, no gross receipts because you don't have any. And this is something that there's some issues that the board really does still need to decide. I'm looking to them for some clear direction on some of the things that affect the business tax. But as far as if you have total crop loss due to the related to the fire, you will have no gross receipts tax, and the Board of Supervisors has waived the minimum due requirements on what we're now the first growing cycle. Somebody may have more than one, but they have definitely waived the minimum. So if there is a reduction in the amount of money that somebody brings in, it adversely affects the fact that they can't pay their minimums. Whatever they pay is what's going to go. So that's something that my office is going to have to deal with as we move through the next 3 or 4 months, is trying to figure out who those individuals were that were adversely affected, and make sure that we don't apply any minimums to them. So that is, I'm not sure if you guys were aware of that or not.
Sherry, I guess I would request that if we can bring before the board when we're asking for clarification, consider the possibility people who are outside of the evacuation area, because I don't think that the ash was limited to the evacuation area, and particularly the smoke damage that has now affected the value of people's crops. So even if people outside the evacuation area, their stuff became a bit crispy but is still marketable. Some people, it wasn't even crispy but now is smoky and will affect the marketability. So I think that if there's a way we could see if they have a desire to broaden it to other effects, as long as those effects can be demonstrated. And then Diane, I would ask, do your staff feel like they have the ability to be able to verify that if somebody needs to document, like that their product is, obviously if it's incinerated, it's easy to document. If it's full of ash, it's easy to document. But if it's just completely smoky, are they willing to smell it and go, oh yeah, this is smoky? Or what's the process if we could develop a process for people?
Well, is that determined within industry. At the wine industry, there's a way of determining whether it has no taint, but I don't know how you do that with cannabis.
I'll let-
I mean, I'm not being, I'm not trying to be smart. I'm just, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how that's determined. How would you determine that?
Well, if you take it to a market, you would have an evaluator that would look at it, and then a lot of it is based on smell. So they would smell product to see if there's any type of, and this goes with dog hair type of other type of contaminants that you can smell if someone was smoking when they were trimming. Those things are all apparent to the evaluator.
There are individuals out there who have that ability. I don't know if I have that ability or if my staff has that ability, but I mean, if we could get something documented from somebody, I don't know, we'd have to look at that.
One of the things that on the way that our office is collecting this tax, and Liz, feel free to, I have Liz from my office here too, feel free to jump in anytime. But what we are doing, this is a gross receipts tax, so first and foremost, we are doing gross receipts. So we aren't even dealing with the minimums now at this point, and we will not be really, we're not, when we send out our returns, we are not requesting minimum. No, we're not billing for that. We're not doing anything with that at this point. My hope was, and our team's hope was that the way that this would be handled is that we would get receipts throughout the year, and then at the once all those gross receipts were in, we'd do a true up at the end of each fiscal year. If you were over that for your permit type, then we wouldn't even have to look at you. If you were not for your permit type, one of the things that we still have to do is reach out and find out how much square footage you have, because the minimums are tied to the square footage and they are not tied to the permit type. And that's something that we are going to have to do when we do that. So we know that in the early part of next year into the spring, we're going to have some reaching out to everybody. I don't know if that's going to be something we're going to be able to find out from ag, or if that's something we're going to send out at this point. We know we're going to have to send something out to our cultivators and find out who is, especially those that did not meet their minimums for their permit type. How much square footage did you have? So we have a lot of issues that we have to deal with after the first of the year. And so at this particular time right now, I think we have some time to resolve this issue of the minimums. I know people are concerned because they're concerned about the dollars, but we do. My hope is that we have this discussion when this cannabis business tax comes back before the board. There are other issues in this ordinance that need to be cleaned up so that we can do what we need to do in the tax office. I don't know, Matt, if that's something that you would recommend, or is that something off the table? I mean, you've been heavily involved in everything cannabis, so.
I mean, it's heavy in the side.
Right.
Talking with Kit about some of the things that you mentioned.
Right.
And for here and now, let's focus on keeping tied to the growing cycle issue and stay on that topic. The rest of it we'll see. We're aware that some cleanup aspects that we'll work on. Hopefully we can tie all those together.
Okay.
To go back and forth.
Right. So that is my hope, though, is we can tie all this together, because we need this resolved. We need this resolved sooner rather than later. And so I don't know if you guys all, hopefully you have a chance to look at the concerns that the Treasurer Tax Collector's Office has, which are sent out the talking points about all the issues. And I've shared these with some of you. I know Hannah and Casey, I've talked with you about these. I don't know if I probably with Ron, but Valerie, but anyway, do you guys see the list there that are our issues right now related to growing cycles and the minimums on those growing cycles?
I just the agenda. Let's see if there are.
Okay. So
I don't have the agenda also.
I can see the update now. I got it.
Okay. You Okay, well, for those that didn't, maybe I'll just go through them kind of so these issues that we need, and this needs to be included, I believe, in the cannabis business tax ordinance to really clarify some of these issues, unless in the direction that you're all recommending, which is of the minimums and all that, which I don't know what that looks like. They're setting the policy, not me. So, but some different issues in the fact that growing cycles could involve 2 fiscal years. And so we need to know what constitutes a growing cycle, beginning, middle, or end of the cycle. Now, I have reached out to Diane on this, and and we agree, based on our end, it makes a lot of sense, is that it's the end of the cycle that constitutes a growing cycle. So particularly on outdoor grows where you plant in April and you cultivate in the fall, we're crossing 2 fiscal years. And so we're going to charge for that particular grow. It's going to be based on the end of that growing cycle, but that needs to be included in the ordinance so that is clear. So there's no questions on that. So the other issue, number 2 is how should minimum growing cycles be applied? And I think Casey mentioned the perpetual grows. That's a concern. Nobody knew about perpetual grows when the ordinance was drafted and adopted. Nobody had any idea, as far as on the county side, about perpetual grows. And so what does that do? One of the things that staff has talked about, and we were considering maybe at some point there needs to be maybe a maximum number of growing cycles, that'd be helpful at our end to address the, that means that the tax would only be applied so many times. That's something that would address the perpetual grows. And so then the other thing goes back to stuff that's happened already with the fires with the zero. I mean, when you've had total crop loss, that's not just on fire victims. We've had fish and game, right, Liz? Somebody today that was rated by Fish Game and has total crop loss. Yeah. And so they came in and they did file their zero gross receipts, yes, which is definitely, yeah, and that's the other things we're hearing that through all the fire devastation, when some of the gardens weren't being watched, of course, that there was theft and so there's a lot of things that we're dealing with, and these are the things. Some of these are things that the board has got to address as far as do they want a minimum tax on these. And we're talking about the growing cycles, and is this, Matt, I mean, we can talk about the minimums that are related to the growing cycle on this work group? I mean, if that's the case.
Well, I think the opinion of the participants of the working group is pretty clear. They prefer there to be no minimums. So, yeah. Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay. And someone have a comment?
And Sherry? Yeah, is this the item that's been moved to the 7th of November board meeting?
Well, the 7th is only the cannabis facilities business license fee approval.
Okay.
So, no, this has made it to this. I raised some issues at a recent meeting, and it was the meeting where the board issued their directives for the fire damage.
Oh, okay.
This group was fast-tracked. So, and that's where we are right now, is
okay.
because of I think one of the reasons, this group was already established. I wasn't on it, and so we were just trying, so that's one thing that just kind of expedited this because of some issues that we're having with the business tax, so.
I just wanted to, perpetual grow, what is that? I'm not familiar with that.
Few people do that. It's more of an indoor situation to where you have several different sections and you may plant one so that you're harvesting every 3 weeks as opposed to one large harvest.
Okay, so, you're centering your planting, so you have, yeah. But you have, we're planting the plants and we're harvesting at this point.
Well, still have gross sales over a period of time. So I don't see what again, it would be a calculation through track and trace of how many, what was the weight that you yielded for a particular quarter. You could still do that as a quarterly estimate.
Right, but you still...
That's the only confusion would be coming into if the square footage is part of the equation, so that somebody's staggering their square footage using the square footage, are you using the cycles? I think that's the only confusion.
Right. So, that's all I got. Okay, Matt?
I'm just thinking about this internally. We thought about if there are an indoor grow with, say, 4 different rooms that are staggered throughout the year, how to try and sort out what one cultivation cycle would be. And so if we had 25 plants per room, and you did, there's 4 different plantings at different times, it's when that first plant in that first room turns over. So that's when we look at how to do the cultivation cycle. And out of wording to express that with yet, but it's trying to figure out once all 4 rooms have turned over, that's your cultivation cycle. To try and remember that.
But I think that some styles of cultivating, especially indoors, don't really do it that way. So I think that's where the issue becomes, is that, as I understand it, there's not only movement from room to room. It would be easy in that case. Let's say if it just moved from room 1 to room 2, then obviously when it finishes in room 2, that's that. But if people are staggering within one room, and you have a square footage issue, that come into play if your square footage is for both rooms, but you're staggering throughout those rooms. That's, I think, what the confusion is.
Or you can look at it this way, is that let's say you have a room that you have a coverage of, you have 2 lights, to keep it simple, and each light covers a 5 by 5 foot area. So you'd be cultivating one group, and then you have in that same room right next to it a staggered grouping, so that you would get multiple harvests out of that same room. Again, I think that you would still be able to do gross receipts over a period and catch what the city was.
The gross receipts is key, I think. It's we want to, that whole tax on a cycle. I don't know, is that something we can play with, or was that something that was in the initiative that kind of set in stone? How does that work, Matt?
Right. Growing cycle comes into play primarily in the tax ordinance. It comes into play primarily in the minimums. And that's it. So.
In the minimum.
Right.
Okay.
That's how that's figured out. Otherwise, it's gross receipts for this year.
First and foremost, we are doing gross receipts. That is what we are trying to, we're moving forward with this, and how we're trying to educate all the people that are having to pay this tax. Gross receipts. Send in zero if you didn't have, which we have a lot, Liz, right? A lot, yes. A lot that sent in their 0 gross receipts, because they're 1 grow a year, and they're in compliance by that 0 return that we got. So May 4th to September 30th, they had no receipts. They're still growing.
Okay.
And so, right. And so what'll happen is now this next time you have more, because they'll start to sell. But do you have anything, Liz?
I think what's so hard is I thought everything was meant for the outdoor growers, the 1 cycle. You pay a minimum if you have like the 5,000 for the type 2, but now with the whole perpetual and indoor, and you can't indoor farmer the same as an indoor farmer, because the plants are all different. So
yeah,
I don't.
Do you have and we can kind of look at ours. Do you have any? And this is to Diane. Do you have any idea of your permits that people have applied for? What the is as far as outdoor to either Both. What is totally just nothing but outdoor? Like,
No, most people are doing mixed light of some kind.
both,
Starting.
which is both?
Right.
Okay.
It could be both.
Send them inside, right, and then put them outside to finish.
But isn't that more an outdoor grow? I mean,
Outdoor.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's also mixed light where there's so many different types of mixed light. There's mixed light where they stop the expression by, or stop the flowering by, light manipulation, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to have more than one cycle. Then there's light or mixed light that would result in more than one cycle. So I don't think that we can really use the category of mixed light to determine the number of cycles. And again, I think the real issue is, are we going on square footage? Are we going on cycles? Or neither of those, because gross receipts really handle everything and just have a set minimum based on I don't know what. I mean, I guess that's the question. Are we doing a minimum based on both square footage and cycles, or one or the other? And I think that's where it gets all tripped up.
On both. It's so what we're going to be tasked to do right now, the way that the ordinance is written, what we're going to be tasked to do is at some point after the first of the year, in the spring, whatever, we're going to have to be finding out for grow cycle number 1, how much footage, grow cycle number 2, how much square footage, grow cycle number 3, how much square footage, and then we're going to have to apply a minimum tax to each one of those. They made it the same. I mean, we have somebody that's growing, they may do one cycle that's 5,000 square feet, and they may do one that's 2,000 square feet. So we're going to look at each one and manually come up with a dollar amount of what the total minimum is, and then look at what they paid in gross receipts, subtract that amount of minimum, and come up with the balance due. It's over. Yeah, good. I mean, if it's more than that, it's not that money the county that's just tax them. The county keeps that is based on gross receipts.
What this is just a huge logistical challenge that I have a suggestion here, and I don't know what, I'm not sure. This would definitely go to Matt in terms of what we're able to do with the voter passed initiative for taxes. But if there was a simple revision of that at the supervisorial level that removed the per cycle minimum, we wouldn't have to do any of this stuff. And then it would just be people would pay whatever 2.5% of their gross receipts are. If they had a really good year, they would pay a lot more taxes. If they had a crop failure or whatever, they would pay less taxes. But we wouldn't have, because this thing becomes just a logistical nightmare in terms of all the different questions about, well, if I had a crop failure or I grew some of my space but not all of my space, and it's the checks and balances there, and it just, at a point we say, well, let's just go to straight gross receipts and skip the minimum per cycle.
And sure, you would have to send somebody out from your office to actually, who would be the verification of that square footage used?
No, the cultivator. It's self-reported, like Liz just said. Yeah.
And ag is, looking at square feet.
Well, and eventually, when we're in track and trace, that'll be a little
Right,
easier.
this will all go away. We're making it super complicated.
So what about minimums? Which, see, here's where we're into the problem is because the minimums in the tax initiative or minimums per square footage, it can be changed. So it could be like a minimum per type. It's not like all of a sudden you can change that because it could end up being more money for somebody, and that's you can't do that. We can do less money for somebody, but can't do more because it's a better initiative, right, Matt?
But were there really minimums per square footage? Or was it a minimum of the 2.5% of the gross?
No, it's based on the square footage.
You're saying in the
The growing
initiative,
cycle.
not in the initiative, not in the ordinance that was passed. Initiative. I believe that it, and I could be wrong, Matt, do you remember? I believe that it was only the 2.5% and that the other issues were added into the ordinance.
Yes, I'm thinking we had the ordinance, the board passed the ordinance and that went to the people.
Yes.
I'm not thinking that we change anything after that.
But I don't believe that in the ballot that any of the particulars.
Tie it back to that ordinance, though?
I thought it was the ordinance that was before
It was definitely the ordinance before it went to the voters.
Okay, let me look at my. I probably can find it in my.
I think it was definitely, I don't know when this was adopted. What's the date on this? I mean, it went to the voters in November, and this was done like in August or something. August 2nd of 2016. Yeah, it was adopted first, and then from this, the voter initiative, I don't know what was in the actual language, and maybe that would be something definitely to look at because, but I know we can't increase any requirements or taxes, but we could decrease. I know that, but it's something that flexibility because of what it actually said in, but if it's tied to this ordinance, then this ordinance drives, right? Drives everything we do, but if
Section 632.300 regarding amendment or repeal. And the first sentence is the board is authorized to repeal the act without a vote of the people to the extent allowed by law. The second sentence authorizes the board to amend the chapter in any manner that does not increase the tax rate above maximum rate specified for each category of business or manner that otherwise constitutes a tax increase. For which vote approval is required, and there's more language after that. We probably, to go through, a final analysis of what exactly is within those boundaries will take more time than a phone call, but we can amend it in any manner that does not increase the tax.
So if we took away
there may be room to maneuver on the minimums. What that exact amount of movement is, I couldn't say right now.
as far as the minimum based on square footage.
Well, remove them for cycle and say so. There's a minimum, but it doesn't apply to each cycle.
How would that work if somebody that had multiple cycles, and how would we determine what their square footage was to base that minimum on?
If we're going with the self-reported formula now, they could use that. Otherwise, whatever license type they applied for. I prefer the self-reported formula because there's a lot of people who didn't get up to their full square foot. But, essentially then you would just have the one required minimum instead of multiple required minimums. Because that's my big concern is, for instance, 1,000 square foot cultivator, if they pull off 3 runs, all of a sudden has a $7,500 minimum tax bill, and who's to say that that could end up being more than the 2.5% of gross receipts. And then in that same vein, it would be nice to consider the possibility of removing or reducing the minimum for the cottage grower. I know a lot of cottage outdoor growers who are looking at it and saying $1,250 is more, 2.5% of my gross receipts.
$50,000 a year. $50,000 a year to pay for one grow cycle at $1,250 a year.
Now, for instance, Paul and Susan in the classic example, I think they gross 31 right here, and so that's a significant increase over the 2.5%.
Yeah. It's so hard because it's all over the map. Okay, so
and essentially, the text of this whole thing is that the massive tax burden that is coming down on cultivators from state, local, and then federal income tax, like we're drowning, and none of these taxes are, I pay the county tax. That's not tax deductible on my federal tax income. So the money I pay the county counts as income for me. And so if we remove I would love to see a recommendation from this group that we remove the minimums altogether and just go flat 2.5%. It would be much, much easier for everybody in terms of logistics. And then cultivators aren't going to be getting penalized for not actually hitting numbers.
This first came out, I advocated for the tax to based on square footage because for my office it'd be much simpler for us to be based on square footage instead of the gross receipts because the self-reported and all that. And I thought that at that time somebody went to the board, like as far as the public comment was that as the cultivators, they really advocated for gross receipts because something crop loss would,
right.
it would be better for crop loss. It appeared to me that the board's way to get around, maybe to ensure that so much money, a certain amount of money was raised, they ended up going with the gross receipts, but then putting this minimum in there. And so, that was kind of what I vaguely remember. I was involved, but I wasn't intimately involved with all this stuff. So that's going to be the issue that Board of Supervisors, if they were looking to have a floor to the taxes, they even consider getting rid of the tax.
And I think that's what's nice about having a working group that is vested with the ability to make recommendations to the board is that, if we make this recommendation, the board doesn't necessarily have to accept it, but it's something that has come channels through processes as a recommendation to the board from the group of stakeholders who have participated with county staff. And so, just in terms of we're ending the season, I'm looking around at the playing field and the landscape with the state taxes of almost $150 a pound on flower and almost $50 a pound on trim coming online. That's a massive, outdoor flower at the dispensaries right now the distributors are buying at $700 or $800, and so we're already under a massive tax burden that any that we can lighten the load. These minimums have potential to really hurt people who, like I say, have crop failures, whatever. And so, just if we could recommend that we'd stick to the 2.5. Then it's kind of one of those a rising tide lifts all boats. If everybody in the county does really well, if all the growers do really well, the county gets totally paid. If the growers don't do well, the county isn't taking something out of our hides.
How, if the recommendation that the minimum for this year only, it would be reviewed, but based on even with what I was talking about, the ash and it's just the crisis that our county has been under. What about if we, and it would be something to consider, it's kind of a middle ground, what if we recommended that the growing cycles and minimums would not be in place for the 17-18 fiscal year only? Not to say that we are going to get rid of the growing cycles, but just for this year because they've already pretty much waived for the fire victims. Pretty good. We don't know what that chunk looks like. But if we have people outside the evacuation zone that have been affected by this, that's going to be a consideration. I don't know what the board's intention was for these minimums. I think it was so that there could be a bottom, some kind of a, not guarantee, but an idea of the dollar amount that's raised. But it was just 17, 18 full year to send the growing cycles and suspend the minimums. And that way, track and trace would be in place next year. We could reevaluate this. Everybody would have more time to look at this as far as what we want to do. Not saying because it is a voter initiative, but saying that we will look at this again for 18-19, but for 17-18, suspend the minimum due and the cycle, the minimum due per growing cycle.
So, this is Hannah. I'm just looking at Ballotpedia, and I don't have the actual text of the entire thing, but I'm looking at Ballotpedia online, and it actually gives an impartial analysis, and it doesn't mention anything about growing cycles. It only mentions the gross receipts per fiscal year with minimum rates tied to square footage. And so, again, not looking, I couldn't pull up the actual initiative, but there's nothing here that I see right now that refers to growing cycles. It just refers to square footage that I can see at the moment. And so what I would suggest is that maybe that recommendation to suspend it until we can get a better handle on the track and trace, that more permits are actually issued, that people see whether or not they're going to be even successful in making it to the state level, right? People might be done. They may be like completely done and close shop because of all the additional requirements at the state level. And think that, rather than say only for this year, but just not even say for how long, but a temporary suspension while these practical and logistical issues can be analyzed.
Yeah, I kind of feel like we need to tie it to a fiscal year, like tie it to 17, 18, so that it can be looked at. Particularly, it needs to be tied to a fiscal to this fiscal year. To me, that way we can. And I then I mean, I get it that we have real problems, but there may be some things that get figured out that may make it. I just don't know that as far as the board, if the board completely suspending this for good, I just think that I feel like we have enough information now to proceed with that.
Well, I guess what I'm suggesting is not that it be suspended for good, but that we recommend a temporary suspension, and it could be at least for this fiscal year, while the nuances of the issues and new information could be presented to the board so that the board can then decide how it wants to handle those issues.
I would recommend just to make it suspended for this fiscal year. That their way there'll be an urgency to get this resolved, not hanging over everybody's head that we may bring this back at any time. Maybe we won't bring it back in this format, or the board will have change. So I don't know how does everybody? I
think it's a great idea. There's so much stuff to be worked on this first go round, honestly.
I mean, it almost feels like, if there was the board put this in there and I mean, I think that it kind of feels like they need to be re-examined why they did that and what was the behind that, because I'm not sure what that was, but I think it had to do with structure, because I think that they lowered it down to 2.5%, and they, some things that they did, I think they felt like there was money, there needed to be something, or the county wouldn't have any revenue at all. So. And Valerie, how do you feel?
What I think it comes down to in the course of the process is that we're starting to see that these minimums may or may not be workable. And so for successful businesses, they're going to clear over the minimums without any trouble. And so what ends up happening is that you put a double whammy on unsuccessful businesses. If your business isn't doing good, you get a higher tax payment than you should have had, than you would have had to make at the 2.5%. It creates it furthers the creation of an uneven playing field. And so, this is something I'd be happy to get up and recommend to the Stoops in public comment and stuff. I think just in terms of both an equity perspective and then also, a public perception of what's going on, perspective, I think this is kind of one of the things where it's like, it could be viewed very, very favorably by the community without, I don't think, having a significantly huge impact on the overall revenues.
See, though, just to the fiscal year?
And, that it be tied to data, that once we have more data, then we can make some, we can have some more discussion about it. Not necessarily that it be just a one-year period only, but that it be that we would come back and review this, in a year at the end of the fiscal year and review it, look at the data, see where we're at, and then make further recommendations at that time.
I agree with that. That sounds reasonable because I think the board was also concerned about the tools of reporting this year with no track and trace in place. And so I think they would have added more of these restrictions, but going forward, we will have, your office, Sherry, will have the ability to track this from more than one source. So I think they suspend it and then come back and take a look at it.
Mm-hmm. And Valerie?
Nothing to add other than what's already been said. But I do also want to add that, me being in Laytonville, in the north area, we have like over 200 parcels. Not everybody cultivates, but we're all small farmers. And, I'm looking to help people here do compliance, be permitted, and these are, these folks, they're basically dealing with very minimum square footage. A lot of them trying to stay under the 2,000 square foot so that does not even trigger the water board, trying to save money in that way. They're trying to save money in every way possible. Then, like this past year, I mean, I would, if I was paying the 2.5, I might have had a $500 tax bill, but with that minimum, I mean, we're talking more than double. And, I mean, with prices going down, it really hurts the little guys. It hurts the cottage cultivators. And to, make this process simple, because, me as a small cultivator, I mean, I'm looking at a lot of paperwork. I'm looking at a lot of stuff that needs to be done. And, it becomes overwhelming. And when I talk to the people around here, it is very overwhelming. And then to make it complicated on top of that, people, some of the folks I'm talking to, they're just getting frustrated. And so if we can at least suspend it, get data, then, we have something that's really tangible. Then when I talk to the folks around here, I can say, okay, look, this is what it is. Now, come on into compliance, come out of the dark, and come in. And, the more people that we get into the program, the more money is going to be made. And I just feel the soups are afraid that they're not going to have money instead of making a taxable situation doable.
I think there's two very simple recommendations looking at. I guess my own secondary thought would be if there's anything that we want to think about, if not today, then in a separate call or between now and a second call about how better to define whatever is in there right now in terms of what the board's expecting to hear back out of this. Right now we're telling them either don't have it at all or don't do it for at least a year. And if we want to spend time at all thinking a bit more about the issue of how to attempt to make the existing language workable, if the board's expecting that as a response from this group, I think we need more time on that.
Yeah, so for me, it's not even a year, it's to June 30th. Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's a way if we just say that if they would suspend, the recommendation is to suspend all minimums on growing cycles for a 2018 fiscal year, and it will be revisited. Because that way, then that hopefully puts all the cultivators' minds at ease that they don't have to worry about a minimum right now, and then that way the board really can. Maybe this will be the working group that needs to come back because we need to see how they're feeling. They may say, "Well, let's get rid of it completely." I mean, I just don't know, so that's the. But I think that if it's not going to get rid of completely, then I think we need to keep it to where we stay up with this and have some answers in the next 4 or 5 months.
And I would also suggest that in preparation for presenting this proposal, to give us more time to get into the weeds of it, so to speak, that we preliminarily outline the issues that we've all discussed that make it so complex, and that led us to recommend this temporary suspension while we go into those issues. So I think that if we could come up with a document and a framework to present to them from, this working group, we've seen that works really well in terms of helping guide them and understand what it is that we're recommending something.
Okay. All right. So we have, okay, so at this point, we'll talk, I'm not sure, definitely we'll talk with Carmel and find out, but I'm not sure if county council, because I'm not sure, what I'm not clear of is, does something have to go in the ordinance that ties that, or is that just a policy directive by the board that we can just implement in our office as far as the tax? I do just like what I just did. I did a directive that I just sent out. It's in the mail. People are getting it today as far as that was issued a couple of weeks ago. But how does that work as far as once does it have to be in here, or is it just direct that they give us and we know what that direction is? Okay. So
I'm going to suggest that maybe Casey and Ron, you want to put together an outline of a document that we could go over at our next phone call, so that the rest of the working group members can weigh in on and add anything from, particularly in light of wanting to address AG's perspective, the tax collector's perspective, county council's perspective, and the cultivator's perspective, and all those reasons why we're recommending that. Is that something that you guys could commit to doing?
Yeah, on that.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm happy to talk to you guys, after you get, as you're working on it. I just can't commit to producing another document because I've done it for so many of the working groups.
Yeah,
Do that
for sure.
And then if we have another date that we can, set for this working group, that document, the internal document, can be brought back to the working group and discussed, and see if there's anything that should be added or taken out or doesn't accurately reflect everybody's intention, and then get it zipped up and then talk to the CEO's office about when it could be put on the agenda to bring to the board.
Okay, and we'll have access to this. There'll be a link to this on the site with all the other working group audio.
Yes, those will be uploaded probably Monday, Tuesday at the latest.
Okay.
Can I make a request? Is it possible since I'm not a cultivator, I don't get those letters, is there a way that you could either post example letters on the tax collector's website, both the ones that you sent out and the ones, or just privately email one?
That is one thing that we have not had a chance to work on, is our website, and we're hoping to be able to do that because as we get, we just are, we had a big website change in the middle of all the cannabis stuff, which everybody had to get their basic stuff on there, so we haven't really had a chance to do anything cannabis related. But yeah, what is, you have I think I have your email.
Yeah, and I'll email you. I'll just send you. I'll shoot you an email so you have it easy to just reply.
Yeah, I can definitely send you that letter. That it's just a one-pager. That says the board's directives, but you definitely can send that to you.
Thanks.
Okay. So I'm not sure if the working groups what's happening with the working groups. They're
continuing to meet. Right now, we don't have a date certain. person because Carmel's time is so occupied with the fire recovery.
Uh-huh.
So I'm just letting the group know that we'll be talking again in another week or two. It could be
Okay,
even
but since that would be fine. Okay.
I'll follow date. I'll have something as soon as I know.
Okay. Okay, sounds good. Thank you all.
Thank you.
And Kate, your call?
Yes.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.